Injustice never sleeps, and not everyone is willing to bow their heads. One golden afternoon in City Park, Olivia Carter sat quietly on a bench, immersed in each page of a book, temporarily forgetting the tense debates in the courtroom. But in just a moment, that peace was torn apart. "Ma'am, may we see your identification?" A deep voice pulled her away from the words. In front of her were two police officers, their eyes suspicious, their voices cold. Olivia looked up at them, her heart sinking. This was not the first time she had been put in this situation. Not because she had done anything wrong, simply because she was a woman of color. The restless-eyed middle-aged man in a gray hoodie across the street looked even more suspicious than she did. But no one paid him any attention. They only had eyes for her. "Did I do something wrong?" Her voice was calm, but an undercurrent of rage was brewing inside. "We've received a report of a suspicious person in the area," one officer replied, his tone sounding as if he knew the script by heart. "This is just a routine check." She frowned. The suspicious person? Was it her? A prominent lawyer? Someone who had never broken any laws? Or was it just that her skin color didn't fit the peaceful setting of the park? "I was born here. I work here. And I don't see anyone else being checked," she replied, looking straight at them. The tension in the air was suddenly palpable. One officer moved his hand toward his gun belt. The movement was brief, but it sent a chill down Olivia's spine. She knew all too well how these situations could end. One slip, one wrong move, and she could be the next name on the news. In the corner of the park, a blonde girl raised her phone and started recording. Emma Blake, 16, had seen similar videos spread online before, and this time, she knew she couldn't turn away. "Why not check on the man?" Olivia asked, tilting her head toward the middle-aged man. He was bending down to tie his shoelaces, a seemingly innocent but covert gesture. A pause, a hesitation, and then an answer that left Olivia with no doubt. "You're making things difficult for us, ma'am." She tightened her grip on the book in her hands. An injustice was evident, over and over again, over and over again. She could speak up. She could fight back. But could she escape the grip of a system that had existed for centuries? Without another word, an officer stepped forward. Before she could react, her arm was jerked back. "You are resisting an officer." "What?" Olivia gasped, her body tensing in shock. "I haven't done anything." The cold metal clanged as handcuffs locked around her wrists. As the onlookers watched, an innocent woman was dragged toward a police car, while the real suspect sat still, hands in his pockets, silently walking out of the park. But this time, it wouldn't be buried in the shadows. Emma Blake was still filming. The video of her went viral. And as the spotlight of the media focused on this story, Olivia Carter knew she couldn't back down. This wasn't about her alone. This was about everyone who had been treated like her. Everyone who had been silenced by fear. People who have been victimized simply because they don't fit in. Can Olivia fight back against the system she once believed in? Or will she become a forgotten name among hundreds of similar cases? Explore this story on Black Footprints, where we don't just tell stories, we reveal the truths people don't want you to know. If you believe that justice shouldn't be just a dream, click subscribe now. It was a peaceful afternoon in Fort Collins City Park, the afternoon sun shining like honey on the tree-lined streets. The air carried a light pine scent, and the chirping of sparrows in the branches. Olivia Carter leaned back on a bench near the pond, her eyes focused on Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Reading was her way of relieving the stress of long days in the courtroom, where her pleas could change a person's life. But at this moment, she was just a woman enjoying the peace of the small town she called home. Suddenly a voice cut through the silence. "Ma'am, may I see your identification?" Olivia looked up, her dark brown eyes meeting the silhouettes of two police officers standing before her. Jake Matthews and Ryan Carter, both dressed in dark blue uniforms, their faces stern. Her heart sank. She knew this situation all too well. A woman of color, sitting alone, while a middle-aged man in a gray hoodie, looking more nervous and suspicious, sat not far across the aisle. But the police paid no attention to him. Only her. Olivia took a slow breath, setting the book down on her lap. Did I do something wrong? Her voice was calm but wary. Ryan Carter shifted his weight to his other foot. We've received a report of a suspicious person in the area. It's just a routine check. Please cooperate. Suspicious person? Olivia wanted to laugh, but instead she looked straight at them. A routine check, but just for me? Jake Matthews frowned, his voice low. Where are you from, ma'am? And can anyone confirm that you're here? The question made Olivia feel her blood boil. Where is she from? She was born in Denver, grew up here, went to law school at Stanford, and practiced at one of the state's most prestigious law firms. But did any of that matter when, right now, to them, she was just another woman of color they could be suspicious of? In the corner of the park, a blonde girl with a ponytail quietly held up her phone. Emma Blake, 16, had seen too many similar videos on social media. Unfair encounters, biased conversations. And now, right before her eyes, a different story was unfolding. Emma's fingers trembled as she pressed the record button, but her eyes were determined. Why not check on him? Olivia tilted her head toward the middle-aged man, who was bending down to unnecessarily tie his shoelaces. A nervous gesture, but no one cared. Ryan Carter glanced over, then back at Olivia, as if she'd said something ridiculous. You're making things difficult for us, ma'am. She smiled, not out of amusement, but because the irony of the situation was obvious. Or am I just asking a reasonable question? Jake Matthews tightened his grip on his belt, his eyes flicking to Emma's phone in the distance, as if he had just noticed her presence. But it was too late. Olivia knew that, however it ended, this was no longer her business. She straightened her back, facing them, her voice firmer. I'm a lawyer, and I know my rights. If I haven't done anything illegal, you have no right to detain me here. And if this is about procedural checks, I believe you want to check everyone in the park, right? There was a long moment of silence. Ryan glanced at Jake, then at Emma, who still hadn't taken her eyes off the phone. Olivia could see the hesitation flash across their faces. And then, like a gentle breeze, they turned and walked away. The middle-aged man stood up as well, shoving his hands into his hoodie pockets and walking in the other direction. No one stopped him. Olivia exhaled, slowly picking up her book. But even though the pages were still intact, she knew that what had just happened had left an invisible mark, not just on her, but on the girl holding the phone. And as Emma stepped closer, her eyes lighting up as if she had just found something important, Olivia knew that this story was far from over. The air in the park suddenly felt stifling, as if the surrounding trees were holding their breath. Olivia clenched her book in her hands, trying to keep her tone calm as she repeated, I was just reading, but Matthews didn't seem to want to hear. His icy blue eyes bored into her, as if she had just confessed to a serious crime. You're refusing to cooperate? Olivia took a deep breath. I told you, I did nothing wrong. If you don't have a legitimate reason, then why won't you answer? Ryan Carter interrupted, his voice accusatory, as if her silence were evidence of guilt. Olivia clenched her jaw. This wasn't the first time she'd been confronted by police abuse, but she'd never thought she'd be in this situation, surrounded, questioned like a suspect, simply for sitting quietly on a park bench. I'm not obligated to answer unreasonable questions, she said slowly, word by word. A tense silence fell, and then something happened that changed everything. Matthews, without saying a word, let his hands slide to the gun at his side in a calculated way. A brief gesture, but one that carried the weight of a threat. Olivia's heart pounded. She knew all too well how these situations ended. She'd seen the names, the faces on the news, people who never got a chance to explain. I'm asking again. Matthews's voice was low. Show me your papers. Olivia felt the eyes of those around her. Some looked away, not wanting to get involved. But in the corner, she could see Emma Blake still filming. A glimmer of hope. But then, Carter acted. Without warning, he grabbed Olivia's wrist, yanking as if she'd try to run away. You're resisting a law enforcement officer. His voice was sharp. What? Olivia gasped. I haven't done anything. But they didn't care. Carter twisted her arms behind her back, the cold cuffs snapping into place in the silence. Olivia didn't resist. She couldn't even, but Matthews's shout was dramatic. Don't resist. Emma gasped. She was still spinning, her hands shaking with rage. She saw clearly. Olivia was completely still. Olivia gritted her teeth as she was pushed toward the police car, her face pressed against the cold glass. The blue sky reflected in her eyes, vast and free. A freedom she had just been stripped of for no reason. As the car door slammed shut, she turned, and her heart sank. Matthews, still standing there, lips curled into a smirk. The smile of someone who knows that nothing will happen to them. That no matter how many times this happens, no matter how many people speak up, the system will still be on their side. But Olivia is no longer alone. Out there, Emma is still clutching her phone. In this video, this truth will not be buried. The walls of the Fort Collins police station cell were gray, the smell of mold and sweat in the air a harsh reminder of where she was. Olivia Carter sat on the cold metal bench, her wrists red from the cuffs that had been removed not long ago. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but the anger inside her boiled like lava waiting to erupt. The door to the interrogation room opened. A middle-aged man entered, the epaulets on his chest marking him as a senior officer. He looked at her with a look of contempt masked by a fake fatigue, as if she were just a pointless nuisance in his workday. "Miss Carter," he said slowly, flipping through the files in his hands. "A renowned lawyer ending up here. How disappointing." Olivia didn't respond. She didn't want to play this game. The officer smirked. "I don't understand. Someone like you should know better than to challenge the police. Someone like her." The words hit Olivia hard in the chest, unvarnished, unadulterated. She gritted her teeth, her hands clenching in her lap. "We're considering 2 charges against you, resisting an officer and obstructing an investigation." He tilted his head, as if considering something interesting. "You know the consequences of that." "Investigation of what?" Olivia laughed dryly. "You're talking about an investigation with no purpose, no evidence, and no probable cause to arrest me?" The officer didn't answer right away. He raised his eyebrows, as if she'd said something funny. "You could try to sue if you want, but I bet no one will take your side. Who do you think will believe you? A black woman in a small, quiet town like this." The words were like a punch to the gut, but Olivia didn't back down. She'd heard enough. For hours later, she walked out of the police station, her eyes meeting the starry night sky. The feeling of freedom should have been a given, but tonight, it felt like a gift from those in power. Emma Blake posted the video online. Within hours, it had gone viral, thousands of comments flooding social media platforms. And Olivia knew she couldn't let this be buried under threats or manipulation by the system. She would fight back. She would expose this. But when she returned home the next morning, her phone buzzed with an anonymous text message. "You're playing with fire, Carter. Stop it, or you'll be in big trouble." She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. This wasn't a simple warning. This was a threat. 3 days later, Olivia walked into her law office early in the morning. The smell of brewed coffee from the reception desk should have been familiar, but as soon as she opened the door to her office, that peace was shattered. The papers on her desk were tossed about, the neatly stacked files now scattered across the floor. Her laptop was open, but the screen was black, as if someone had tried and failed to access it. Olivia stood still for a few seconds, then slowly closed the door behind her. Someone had broken in, and they wanted her to know that they could do more than send a threatening message. Olivia Carter has never been one to back down. Years of law school have taught her that justice doesn't just happen, it has to be earned. And this time, she's not fighting just for herself. She's fighting for everyone like her. Everyone who has been stopped, questioned, treated unfairly because of the color of their skin, because of how they show up in a place where someone thinks they don't belong. In a small conference room in downtown Denver, Olivia looks around the table at which her friends, colleagues, and allies sit. To her left is Daniel Wong, a brilliant civil rights attorney with more than a decade of experience fighting police abuse. Next to him is Maria Torres, an activist and human rights attorney who has personally sued the Los Angeles Police Department and won. Next to them is Jamal Green, a longtime friend of Olivia's who knows the justice system from the inside. "They won't back down easily," Daniel said, flipping through a thick file. "The police department has hired one of the strongest law firms in the state to defend those two officers. They'll try to get the case dismissed before it even gets to trial. Not only that, Maria interjected, her eyes serious. They're trying to spin the story in their favor. I've seen the speeches the police department makes in the media. They're trying to paint you as a troublemaker, Olivia. Olivia nodded. She'd expected this. A black person standing up to the system? They'd do anything to paint her as a troublemaker, or worse, a danger. Good, she said, her voice calm but firm. Then we're not just going to be reactive. We're going to be aggressive. We have Emma's video. We have witnesses. And we have the facts. A chorus of nods echoed around the room. But they both knew the truth wasn't always enough to prevail in a system so accustomed to protecting the powerful. 2 days later, Olivia got an unexpected call. It's Robert Hayes. Olivia straightened in her chair. She knew the name. One of the top officials in the Fort Collins Police Department, a big player in local politics. I'm listening, Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice flat. I'll get right to the point, he said, his voice low, professional, but not without a hint of coldness. We want to resolve this peacefully. You don't need to drag it out like this. What do you mean? We can settle, Hayes continued. A substantial settlement. More than you could ever get if you win your case. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment. She wasn't surprised. She had seen this before. The system didn't want to be exposed, didn't want to be held accountable. They didn't care about justice. They just wanted the problem gone. She took a deep breath. No. There was a long pause. Then Hayes let out, the heavy sigh of a man used to getting what he wanted. Are you sure? His voice was low, a hint of menace hidden beneath the surface politeness. As sure as ever. Okay, he said, his voice suddenly icy. But remember, this isn't just about you anymore. The call ended. Olivia put the phone down, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that. She knew they wouldn't stop here. But she also knew something else. They were scared. And that meant she was on a right track. On the day of the trial, Olivia Carter walked into the courtroom looking calm. But inside, she could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins. She had prepared herself for the legal battle to bring Matthews and Carter to justice. But life had its twists and turns, and this was one of them. The day before, she had received a notice from the court. She would be judging another case involving the same two police officers. At first, Olivia thought it was a joke. But no, Matthews and Carter had been subpoenaed for another case, an excessive force case against a homeless man last month. And fate had placed her in the position of judge. She couldn't refuse. She didn't want to refuse. As Olivia sat in the judge's chair, tapping her gavel on the table, the silence in the courtroom was almost suffocating. No one but her knew that the two defendants today were the same people who had humiliated, arrested, and threatened her. And then, the door opened. Matthews and Carter walked in, the confident airs of people used to being protected by the system. But when they looked up and saw who was sitting on the bench, everything changed. The confidence vanished in a flash. Carter froze, his face pale, as if he had seen a ghost. Matthews swallowed, glanced quickly at their lawyer, then looked back at Olivia with a look of horror and anger. Olivia's expression did not change. She was still a judge, calm, objective, not letting her personal emotions get in the way. But she knew what they were thinking. She saw Matthews's hands tighten, his teeth grit. She heard Carter whisper, almost hiss, to their lawyer. We're done. But Olivia said nothing. She just nodded, looking straight at the two men who had once believed themselves above the law. Let us begin the trial. The courtroom was packed. Press, activists, and ordinary citizens concerned about justice were all there. There was a tension in the air, as if everyone understood that this was more than just a trial. It was a trial that could change the way an entire system worked. Olivia Carter sat bolt upright in the judge's chair, her eyes scanning the room. Below her, Matthews and Carter sat at the defense table, dressed in suits but with tense faces. Carter, who had always been so arrogant, looked nervous. Matthews tried to keep his face stoic, but Olivia saw the confusion in his eyes. Call the first witness, the prosecutor said. The door opened, and Ethan Miller walked in. He was a young black man in his mid-20s, tall and thin, but clearly still suffering from the effects of old trauma. A faint scar appeared on his left cheekbone, and, as he stepped onto the witness stand, the courtroom held its breath. The prosecutor stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Mr. Miller, can you tell me what happened on the night of the 14th of last month?" Ethan swallowed, his hands clasped together on the stand. I was just walking home from work. I didn't do anything, but then he took a deep breath, as if trying to suppress the painful memory. I heard screaming behind me. When I turned around, those two officers, he glanced briefly at Matthews and Carter, his eyes flashing with pain. They were on me. The prosecutor nodded, encouragingly. "Did they ask you to stop?" "Explain why." Ethan shook his head. "No, I didn't even get a chance to say anything before they pinned me down." The audience erupted in angry murmurs. Olivia tapped the gavel on the table. "Order in the courtroom." The prosecutor continued. "Are you resisting?" Ethan smirked, but it wasn't a real smile. It was bitter. I didn't even have a chance to resist. The image of a young man being beaten for no reason, defenseless, was clear in everyone's mind. But what really made the room explode was when the prosecutor signaled to the technician, "Please watch this video." The large screen in the middle of the courtroom lit up. Footage of Emma Blake appeared, crystal clear. The room fell silent. Olivia appeared on the screen, sitting on a park bench, reading a book. Matthews and Carter's voices rang out suspiciously, and then their actions were clear as day. The threat, the abuse of power, the fake shout of "don't resist," while Olivia stood completely still. The prosecutor said nothing, just let the video play. As Matthews's hand tightened around his gun, someone in the room gasped, and as Olivia was dragged toward the police car without resistance, the room erupted in outrage. When the screen went black, the prosecutor turned back to the defendant. "These two officers lied on the record, and it's not the first time." Matthews was flustered, trying to hide his embarrassment, but sweat was already beading on his forehead. And Carter, Olivia stared at him. Something had changed in his eyes. Remorse. For the first time in the entire trial, he looked like a man who understood that things had gone too far. But Olivia didn't let her emotions get the best of her. This wasn't just about the two officers. This was about the system, and the system was about to be exposed. The courtroom fell silent as Olivia Carter banged the gavel on the table one last time. All eyes were on her. In this moment, she was no longer the victim, no longer the lawyer fighting for justice. She was the one deciding the fate of two police officers who had thought they would never be held accountable for their actions. Olivia took a deep breath before speaking. After reviewing all the evidence, it is the court's decision that Officer Jake Matthews and Officer Ryan Carter will be stripped of their badges, ordered to undergo ethics training, and subject to the severest form of disciplinary action. She could hear someone gasp, probably Emma, who had recorded the video. Maybe Ethan Miller, who was finally getting some measure of justice. But for Matthews and Carter, the moment was a shock. Matthews' jaw clenched, his face pale. Carter's was different. He bowed his head, his eyes full of conflict. He knew he deserved it. Olivia didn't take her eyes off them. She didn't believe that a conviction could change the system, but at least today, these two couldn't continue to abuse their power with impunity. The trial is over. She gavelled down one last time. After the trial, Olivia walked out of the courtroom, the clamor of reporters and supporters crashing into her like a wave. But she didn't stop to answer any questions. She just wanted to get out of here, to feel the fresh air without the weight of justice on her shoulders, at least for a few minutes. But then a voice stopped her. "Carter!" She turned. Ryan Carter stood there, no longer in his police uniform, just a man with a face marked by a battle he had lost. He walked slowly toward her, his eyes filled with something Olivia had hoped for but never expected. "I'm sorry." The words were simple but heavy. Olivia looked at him for a moment. She could see the regret in Carter's eyes, but an apology wouldn't change what had happened. Her lips twitched, but it wasn't a smile. "Prove it with your actions." Carter blinked, as if surprised by her answer. But then he nodded, slowly, as if finally understanding. A few weeks later, an article appeared on the front page of the Denver Post. Former Officer Ryan Carter speaks out on injustice in policing. We need change. In the article, Carter recounted his years in the force, how he turned a blind eye to abuse, and the moment he realized he was wrong. He was no longer a police officer. He had resigned. But this time, instead of blindly enforcing the law, he was fighting to fix it. Olivia read the article, then folded the paper and set it aside. She didn't know if Carter had really changed. But she did know one thing. That day, in the courtroom, she had planted a seed. And if the system was ever going to change, it would have to start with people like him. She stood up and stepped into the light. Her fight wasn't over. But today, she had won an important battle. 3 months after her trial, Olivia Carter stepped up to the podium at a major police reform conference in Washington, D.C. The spotlights riveted her, hundreds of eyes hanging on her every word. "We can't let justice be an accident," she said, her voice strong and clear. "It shouldn't depend on who's lucky enough to have a video of the truth or who has the strength to speak up. Justice should be the norm, not the exception." Applause erupted, but Olivia didn't stop. She knew that applause wasn't what mattered. It was action. She had been a lawyer defending her clients, a victim of injustice, a judge making life-changing decisions. And now, she was a voice for a movement larger than herself. She had attended dozens of panel discussions, worked with lawmakers, pushed for new policies to oversee police. The Carter Bill, a proposal to increase transparency in police reporting, was being debated in Congress. She knew not everyone would support it, but that didn't stop her. After her talk, Olivia stepped out of the room and took a deep breath. The debates, the interviews, the closed-door meetings, they were all part of the larger fight she had chosen to fight. Suddenly, a hand touched her arm gently. Olivia turned and saw an older woman, her silver hair neatly cropped, her eyes deep and warm. She wore a simple beige coat, but there was something about the way she looked at her that made Olivia feel a quiet dignity. "Miss Carter," she said softly, "I've waited a long time to see someone like you stand up." Olivia smiled, but the old woman shook her head, taking her hand. "What you did not only helped you, but all of us. But the fight is not over." Olivia looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of a generation in those words. She squeezed her hand, nodding slowly. "I know," she replied. "That is why I will not stop." The old woman smiled, nodded, and left, leaving Olivia standing alone in the vast space. Over the years, she had fought for justice as a lawyer, defended it as a judge, and now she was building it as an activist. She knew there would be more battles ahead, but when she looked up at the vast blue sky, she no longer felt alone, because this time, she was not fighting just for herself. She was fighting for everyone.